Yes, indeed, we've got Mr. Morrison, Quakers, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joining us next to weigh in on that subject matter. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Now, this talk about federalism has been with us for a while. Different components of it, different suggestions about it. The latest being what we just saw in that report by the PDP governors after the southern governors had met and then spoken about some of those matters. But first, give us your impression of what you make of all of these calls, particularly the most recent ones in the country.
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. I'll be honest with you, we're not practicing through federalism. When you look at the Nigerian constitution, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the problem is not with the laws, the problem is also not with the rules. The problem has to do with the enforcers or implementers of the various laws, rules, regulations, and including the constitution. Now, the constitution is very apt, it's clear on the face of it. Now, we're talking of devolution of powers. When you look at the provision of the constitution, even though it is not perfect, it is a working document, a document in progress, a document that will also require some amendment as we forge ahead. But there are certain provisions of the constitution that are also very clear on this. I quite agree with His Excellency Aminu Tambol, the governor of Sokoto State, when he talked about the need to tinker with the provisions of the constitution as regards the police force. That is long overdue. But yet there are other provisions of the constitution that have actually not been implemented. Now, you recall that Johnson is on strike. What led to that? The failure of the governors of the states to observe the clear and unambiguous provision of the constitution to the letter in ensuring that judicial independence is upheld. So to that extent, I can say this to you, we're not practicing true federalism. And so this is the time for all sides to sit down and talk about this. And so if it's going to come by way of restructuring of the country without necessarily looking at secession, I think the time has come for us to sit down and talk. And maybe that's why all of this is coming up at this time, particularly because of the state of insecurity. I mean, it's irritating, annoying, disappointing for us to read in the papers that the house of the secretary to the government of the federation was burgled, even in the villa. So nobody is safe, nobody is secure. And this is the time has come for us to really critically look at the Nigerian state with a view to ensuring that clear and unambiguous provisions of the constitution are upheld, and where there is a lacuna issue, we now need to think out the constitution. And I'm happy with the National Assembly with a view to also amending the provision of the constitution in relation to certain provisions of the constitution.
Does the principle of true federalism really exist? Or isn't it that nations choose what model works for them and implement it?
Now, the principle of true federalism actually exists. What we have in Nigeria, unfortunately, it's like an amalgam or a combination of a federal system of government and also parliamentary. Now, if you look at the Nigerian state clearly and critically, what you observe is a form of unitary system of government, but it is not a unitary system of government. We combined it with the American federalism. Now, what is the federalism that is being practiced in America? You have a three-tier system of government. You have the federal, you have the state, and you have the county, which is similar to ours. We have the federal, you have the state, and then you have the local government. But are we indeed practicing it? Now, you have a document to guide us. The challenge we have is our failure to adhere strictly to the clear and unambiguous provisions of the Constitution. It might not be a perfect document. Now, some people have said, oh, it was a document handed over to us by the military. But are there provisions that address some inequality or some imbalance within the system? The answer to that is yes. But we have refused to even implement those few provisions in the Constitution. Is there true federalism? Yes, there is true federalism. You recall some time back, Donald Trump, as the president of the United States of America, invited the Speaker of the House, and I think whether the Chief Justice of the country, and they had a meeting in the White House. Now, along the line, tempers rose, and then you could see her saying to the president, "President, you don't mess with me. Now, can you have that here?" She made the president to realize that, look, I also had an arm of government, just like you are. You are the executive. I had the legislature. You cannot be dictating to me. Can you have that here? The answer is no. But the constitution clear on this. The answer is yes. The most powerful organ, as far as I'm concerned, in this country is actually the National Assembly, because they have the power to make laws, the power to donate powers to those who exercise provisions of the Constitution. So when you look at it in that context, is there true federalism? Yes, there is. But attitude is the problem. Attitude is what is standing in the way. Religion, culture, ethnicity is what is actually hindering us from implementing the clear and unambiguous provisions of the Constitution. So that's the challenge. Is there true federalism? Yes, there's true federalism, but we have refused to practice it.
Mr. Quakers, you seem to have seen some kind of crystal ball to know the kind of question that I want to ask you next, because you've begun to reference it. You said something earlier that the problem is not with the laws, it's not with the policies, it is with the implementation. And you use the word implementers. So if there are such a people as are supposed to implement the laws to the letter, or at least as far as humanly reasonable, and those laws are not being implemented, the laws are also clear about the consequences. In that regard, when the needful is not being done, who is supposed to take charge in calling them to order? You have referenced that it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to donate power to certain people to get things done. When they do not get those things done, doesn't it also lie with the National Assembly to call them to order? And what has hindered that from happening so far?
The same thing. Thank you so much for that, your question. The same thing I said, attitude. A number of factors come in. The issue of culture, the issue of ethnicity, the issue of religion. Now I'll give you a particular example. The other day, a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria got up and said that there's a president who is not performing. And that from all indications, it appears that the apparatus of the state in relation to security has broken down, and that the president must be impeached. Some of his colleagues got up and said, no, he cannot be impeached. Now, is there a provision in the Constitution that empowers the National Assembly to impeach and unperforming chief executive of the Federation? Is there a provision that empowers the National Assembly to call the president to order, to call the president to come and brief them? The answer to that is yes. But guess what? Some people will say, oh, he is a member of our party. Two, some will say, oh, this is our own time to have someone in the villa. We have a president from our own part of the country. Why would you want to impeach him? So there are all kinds of primordial sentiments and conspiration, and these things hinder the work. But you can see, when you open the provision of the Constitution, you see there are checks and balances. No arm of government is more superior than the other. But because of attitude, look at the way the judiciary is being treated. Look at the way and the manner the Chief Justice of Nigeria was also removed. Look at the current Chief Justice, right? A situation where the Constitution provides that money that is meant for the judiciary should be given to the judiciary. It's not being given to the judiciary. So the question is, why is that so? So you can understand that this whole thing boils down to the same thing that we've always talked about. Our inability to move away from primordial sentiments and consideration to ethnic bias, to religious bias, to culture, and follow the law to the letter. Now, Section 1, Sub 1 of the Constitution clearly says that the Constitution is supreme and its provisions are binding on all authorities and persons. So, in other words, once you flag the Constitution and you take it up, everybody is expected to adhere strictly to it. When we were growing up, we were taught about checks and balances. And so it is to ensure that there is equilibrium in political environment and also in governance. But today, it has been so diluted, it has been so watered down, that it appears that it's non-existent. The president, someone, the other time we saw the deputy speaker, the deputy senate president, going to see the president, introducing himself to the president, and almost kneeling down to greet the president. It's not done. There's no way that, but when you have that father-son figure relationship, it will hinder progress. It will hinder the efficiency and effectiveness of our
Mr. Quakers, does this in any way suggest that the National Assembly either doesn't know its job
or is not doing it? Because from what you have said so far, it sounds like we have a written constitution, and then we have some unwritten constitution somewhere that seems to be taking precedence over the one that we all know, the 1999 constitution as amended and all of that. So it's like we are between the devil and the deep blue sea. Are we helpless?
Well, I won't say we are helpless. What I think should happen is this. There's a need for our legislators to go on some sort of enlightenment, some sort of awareness. It's important for them because, you see, everyone who today is in one governmental position or the other, one governmental structure or the other, they were made to swear to uphold the provisions of the Constitution. The governors, when they were to be sworn in, they said that they were going to uphold the provision of the Constitution and discharge the duty of their functions without fear or favor or ill will. Same thing with the president, even the National Assembly. Now, the National Assembly is actually the watchdog to ensure that the provisions of the Constitution are upheld, implemented to the letter. Now, the question is, have there been infractions or breaches in relation to the provision of the Constitution? The answer is yes. Are they helpless? They're not helpless. Now, if you say an unwritten constitution, that's an anomaly. But again, it boils down again to what I said earlier about attitude. What is the attitude of our legislators? What is the attitude of our governors? How come that the clear and unambiguous provisions of the Constitution are not being implemented? Now, anyone who found, like my friend will say, there must be consequences for bad behavior. Is there a provision for that? The answer is yes. When you have someone who is not performing, whether as governor or whether as president, you have the House of Assembly of the state in relation to the governor, you have the National Assembly in relation to the president, but all kinds of primordial settlements have come in to whittle down. How would a law work? A law will only work when the people who it is made for believe in it and will make it, because the law cannot work on itself. It has to work by implementation. It has to work by people who believe in it. You give life to the law by believing in the law. So, to a large extent, as far as I'm concerned, it's not one of an unwritten rule. It's primordial sentiments, ethnic conspiration that has actually whittled down the effectiveness of the law.
Well, Mr. Quakers, these primordial sentiments did not stop the January 2012 fuel price protests that was spontaneous all over the nation. The same primordial sentiments did not stop NSARS from happening in very many parts of the country. In the event that the National Assembly, as you were saying, do not do the needful, what are the likely consequences?
And that's what I must say to you, that that's a very deep question that you've asked, and I commend you for that. And the time has come for us to also begin to consider people revolution. It's a ticking time bomb. Someone posted something to me recently about some people in Kwara State who went to the Emir's palace. I don't know how true that is. And what was their slogan? The people are hungry. The people are hungry. Now, you remember how the French Revolution also started, right? And I recall that Senator Smart Adeyemi, distinguished senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, stood before his colleagues and was in tears. And he was saying to them, if we don't do something now, a time will come that we'll all be sacked from this house and there will be no Senate. Now, anyone who is sensitive should address the need of the people. Now, look at section 14, I think sub 3 of the 1999 Constitution. Government exists for the welfare and the security of the people. The power lies in the people. Who are those who voted you into office? The people. Whose needs are you to address? The people. But we have reversed the order. It appears that the government has now become the overlords, and the people will remain as peasants and poor. Go around you and see the number of people that are starving and are hungry. So you can see it's actually a ticking time bomb. If it's not addressed, what you have said is exactly what will happen. NSARS is an example of the people who reacted to police brutality. Fuel increase is an example of government insensitivity to the plight of the people. So it's actually a ticking time bomb. Now, a pastor the other day came on air and said to his people that you don't need a soothsayer to tell you that there are ominous signs in the air and that they should have a plan B. What is he saying? That is the people in his church should have a plan to exit from the country. My brother, go to the airport and see those who are privileged living the country in their droves. Now, the poor man on the street doesn't have such luxury. What does it take to address the needs of the people? Industries are not functioning optimally. Look at our roads. Hospitals are in comatose. Look at the number of people who die on a regular basis because they cannot afford medical care. The hospitals that are around, the private hospitals around, they can't even afford to pay their medical bills. Not once, not twice. We'll go around and we'll see things for ourselves. We cannot continue like this.
Mr. Quakers, speaking about devolution of powers, there is this impression that it's got to be from the federal government to the states. In fact, they just thought that, look, all of those items will have, how many of them? 98 items on that list. They want, we see that the exclusive list has got 68 of them, and then the states about 30 of them. But there are those who suggest that it has to go beyond devolving powers or amending that list from what the federal government can do and that of what the states can do. In fact, they think that what it should be is, yes, you amend the list and have something, we should have federal list, state list, and then local governments as well, because the states themselves is where a lot of things happen, and that if we don't focus on the states properly, we just may replicate what challenges plays out at the center in the states.
Thank you so much. Indeed, the time has come for us to look at the exclusive legislative list in the second schedule of the Constitution. And I will give voice to the school of thought or the group that is saying that the devolution should cut across federal, state, and local government. Right now, as we speak, the presence of local government is actually not felt in any of the states. You have local government chairmen that are puppets of the government. You have local government chairmen that go to the governor, cap in hand, to get money to execute programs and projects in their various local government areas. And that is sickening. But the constitution on this is already clear as to what it says. Now, the question is, do the governors actually believe in the existence of the local government? Because the local government is actually taking development to those who the states cannot reach. That's what we're taught. Now, earlier your colleague asked if we're practicing true federalism. On paper, we have a semblance of true federalism because we're trying to copy a system that we're not schooled, trained, or prepared to implement. In America, you have the federal, you have the states, and you have the counties. The county is similar to our own local government. Same thing, you have the police, you have the federal police, you have the state police, and then you have the county police. They call them paratroopers. Right? Now, if you have the same structure here, I don't see why are we clamoring for devolution. This situation had come to a head because of the incessant insecurity in the country. And that's why everybody is now clamoring for devolution of powers. That the exclusive legislative list that has 68 items. And indeed, I agree. Some of the items there, it's not one that the federal government should shoulder. But let us even say yes, that the federal government is right now carrying. What about the other things in the concurrent list? How far have the state governors also gone in implementing some of those provisions? So the challenge again will go back to what we said earlier. Our attitude is something we need to deal with. All right? You want to unbundle the provision in relation to the police. I totally agree now. I have here the Constitution, particularly section 215, sub 4. And I'll read what it says here. Subject to the provision of this section, the governor of a state or such commissioner of the government of the state, as he may authorize in that behalf, may give to the commissioner of police of that state such lawful direction with respect to the maintenance and securing of public safety and public within the state as he may consider necessary. And the commissioner of police shall comply, look at the word operative word there, shall comply with these directions or cause them to be complied with, provided that before carrying out any such directions under the foregoing provisions of this subsection, the commissioner of police may request that the matter be referred to the president or such minister of the government of the federation as may be authorized in that behalf by the president for his direction. Now, mind you, the governor is the chief executive officer of the state and is responsible to ensure of safety of lives and also property. But the commissioner of the police of the state ordinarily should report to him, but it's not reporting to him. So he gives directive to the commissioner of police, but the commissioner of police will now need to clear that directive from the presidency. No federal system operates in this manner. And the reason why that is so is because the governors of the state do not have their own police force or police unit or law enforcement units. And so it's actually a problem. So the time has come for us to look at the provisions of item. Now, look at the same schedule, the 68 items. I also took time to highlight some of them that I think shouldn't even be there on the exclusive legislative list. Now, railways, that's item 55. Why should I be on the exclusive legislative list? Has no business been there. The state can have its own. The federal, it can even be on the concurrent list. Stamp duties has no business on being the exclusive list. Police and other government security services established by law has no business being on the security list, on the exclusive legislative list. And so many other provisions. Mines, minerals, including oil fields and oil mining, geological surveys, and natural gas should not be on the exclusive legislative list. It should be on the concurrent list.
You know,
what is it has to do with revenue allocation and revenue sharing.
Yeah, those who have suggested that the office of the president has tried to put in place certain changes in the law such that it could give a lot more relevance and presence to the local government, and if not all of these have, you know, in one way or the other, been impeded by the state executives, the state governors. And some then think that the state governors have a bigger responsibility, much more than the federal government, because after all, the one you highlighted now, judicial autonomy, local governments, they say, look, the states themselves, the state governors are the ones who even, they have control, so to speak, to their members in the National Assembly. So if they wanted all of these changes to happen, if they come together, these things can happen, and not necessarily keep passing the buck, as they suggested, to the center.
I totally agree. And I recall that sometimes it doesn't have to do with the governors, the constituents themselves. Now, I'm happy with the step that the National Assembly has taken in amending the Constitution, which is what is constitutionally recognized. Now, but any constituency that wants to see changes in relation to its constituency has a representative in the National Assembly. So you can walk through your representatives. Now, look, these are the things that we're clamoring for. These are the things that we can do. Now, this devolution can only come from the National Assembly, because that is the arm of government empowered to make law for the peace, good, and order of the country. And so if the National Assembly is saddled with this, remind you, the Constitution, as it were, is seen as a product of the National Assembly, right? Lawmaking is the forte of the National Assembly. Now, if an issue arises that needs to be addressed, it can only be addressed when the National Assembly's attention is drawn to it, either from the constituency, it could even be from the governor. But the governor is actually not responsible to address these issues. It can only come from the people. Mind you, representatives in the National Assembly are not accountable to the governor of the state, but to the people that voted him into office. And so we must be very, the way it is, even the governor cannot hold to ransom the House of Assembly of the state. Because the power that they enjoy is mutually exclusive.
But some say that is on paper. Because as things stand today, which state assembly can look the executive in the eye in their states and do whatever it is that they want to do? Because they say, look, the state government controls almost all the resources and everything and ensures that they do his bidding. So they don't think any state assembly can do their will without the governor's stamp.
Now, you see, I'm happy that you have raised that. But look at the Constitution. What does it say about funds for the House of Assembly of the state? What does it say about funds for the local government of the state? I mean, it's very clear and apt. It's just to ensure that they're not under the wings, they're not under the shackles of the chief executive of the state. But what you have, again, like I said earlier, it's an attitude thing, and it's eating us up and it's destroying us. And if we don't address it, it's something that will happen to a point where you now begin to breed oligarchs. You also now begin to breed autocrats. You now begin to breed people who have no regard for rule of law, and suddenly you now start having dictators. So you have a situation where at different levels, some governors have been accused of dictatorial tendencies. But the House of Assembly of the state is actually set up to checkmate the excesses of the governor. Now, you can't even, if the legislators come together and simply say that, look, this is what we're going to do, the governor will be removed, you'll be impeached. But they get political consideration, all kinds of consideration coming to dilute their powers. So they can't even make the of what is theirs legitimately and by the position of the Constitution. How
do we then ensure that what several people are calling for now in the name of devolution of power and amending that list is, for instance, if they were to reorganize the police, you have the federal, the state, and local government police system. If you have that in the states, the governors definitely will have a huge say in how that happens. And they then suggest, as things stand, having seen these signs, if you go ahead and devolve those powers, how are we going to ensure that the governors will not become thing gods in the states?
Now, you see, the beauty of this is that you also have another arm of government, which is also the judiciary. And I'm happy with what Johnson is doing. Although we're the ones who are suffering, we're the ones who are feeling the impact of the strike. But I think it's something that at the end of the day will help the nation to ensure that there is indeed clear-cut demarcation, indeed separation of powers. Now, if you find yourself in that kind of situation, the judiciary is also there. Some members of the House of Assembly of the state, once judicial independence is guaranteed with what is going on, you will then have some members of the House of Assembly of the state who probably take this matter up in court. Abuses are here and there. And we can also see, in the face of clear and unambiguous provision of the Constitution, governors are not implementing what the Constitution says in terms of revenue allocation, in terms of revenue disbursement. If they're not doing so at this point, now when you now devolve powers and you now create a state police, will it also not be used to hound political opponents? It's a possibility. But again, until we get to the bridge, right now we can't sit and legislate. It's something that has become apparent. It's something that has to happen because as it is, the security of lives and property within the state is something that the governor of the state is responsible for. And from what we've just read now in section 215 sub 4, that the commissioner of the police of the state does not report to the governor of the state directly and can't take lawful orders per se from the governor, but has to clear with the presidency. The time has come for us to have that in place. Now, we must also then have a system in place that will check the excesses of the governors. And I'll give you an example. I think it was it last year or 2 years ago, during Donald Trump's era, the chief of defense staff came on air and said that the army is not at the whims and caprice of the executive. He could speak that way. Why? Because of the constitutional provision that protects him. But yeah, the constitution indeed protects. But you see, there's actually a myth making the president or the governor in the state the most powerful. It's not so. Until some people now begin to take the initiative and begin to take the step. But again, there's also the aspect of mutual distrust, mutual suspicion that comes across. Look, our problem is deep. Our problem is deep. And until we begin to sit down and discuss this, I don't see us getting out of the woods. Sadly.
Well, indeed, a lot of people have agreed that there is a need to discuss, but there are those who still say that there is nothing wrong with our constitution. A few of your colleagues believe that right now, if we're able to implement what we currently have in this constitution with some amount of sincerity, we will make headway. Do you subscribe to the notion that this is just a lack of will, of making the best situation of what we currently have, rather than faulting the constitution itself?
I totally agree. Earlier, I did say that the constitution might not be a perfect document, but even as it is, it has provisions that addresses some of the inequality and imbalance within the system. But we're yet to even implement the clear and unambiguous provisions of the constitution. We're not talking about amendment. The constitution might not be a perfect document because there are a number of irregularities here and there. For instance, revenue sharing based on land mass, based on population density, population, it's also an anomaly that needs to be addressed. How then do you determine, oftentimes when census is being conducted, right, a particular area is seen to have more people, right, and then you also do allocation based on land mass. Yes, land mass, when you ought to consider people. Now, derivation principle based on 30%, it is also something that should be looked into. Now, you could also see, for instance, Zamfara discovered gold. For quite a while, it was being exploited, it was being used, and was never brought to the federal attention for so long. Now, what has happened up until this moment? Nothing. So you also have problems in relation to certain provisions of the constitution. But the constitution might not be a perfect document. But what it has done so far is actually not being implemented. It's clear now because provisions are not being implemented. So it's also a problem. So the will, I totally agree, the will to ensure that the constitution works is just not, is what is lacking.
How do you think we can get all of us to summon the will, or more particular, political leaders who are the ones who swear an oath to protect the Constitution? How do we get them to, develop that will to do what is right by the Constitution?
Well, to a large extent, at least I'm happy with what is going on. The spate of insecurity. There's nowhere to hide now. And I'm also happy with the global law now on corruption, on money laundering and all of that. So a lot of them will have to sit back and do things. Now, like earlier I said, there's also a ticking time bomb. The people out there are also restive. The youths are also angry. The youths have become more sophisticated now than ever before. And so anyone who is in government right now has to sit up. Because you need to start addressing the needs of the consciousness or the repercussion that will come for failure of leadership that will now result in the will being there. Oftentimes people come into government without any preparation. Now, Chapter 2 writes the fundamental objectives are to guide governance. And I can say this to you for free, that many governors have not taken time to understand the objectives that have been enshrined in the provision of the Constitution. Now, once that is internalized, and so there's a need to also educate and enlighten. You don't vote for Nigerians also have a major role to play. You're voting for people who lack integrity. You're voting for people like somebody described as for stomach infrastructure, people who buy a bag of rice for you. The other day, we saw on TV a particular politician going to the north and giving bags of rice to the people there. You can only take that for a season. But you need to have a life of pleasure, a life of comfort, a life of security. I listened to the ruler of Dubai about vision, and he said, why wait for 20 years when you can do all of this within 5 years? A country that is competing with itself. That's leadership. And that is what is lacking. So,
you have cited the fact that circumstances seem to be forcing us now.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Quakers. You're citing the fact that circumstances seem to be forcing us right now to take some action. But we have seen a lot of movement, but very little has come out in terms of concrete achievement. How optimistic are you, considering the fact that a number of people say that we've been here before, we seem to know how to play brinksmanship pretty well, and it would seem that at some point some of our political leaders are beginning to take that for granted. How confident are you that as a result of the circumstances, especially the security situation confronting us right now, that we will be able to make something concrete for the betterment of the country?
Well, I thank you for that. You need to go out there and see things for yourself. Earlier, I did say there's a ticking time bomb. We go to malls, we go to shopping centers, we go to supermarkets within, and I can say this to you that there is some tension in the land. You don't need, you can feel it, you can sense it. It's so real. And the governors themselves can also see it. And so if they don't begin to address this, in the past years, they got away with a number of things, but it's no longer business as usual. There's also now global attention. The other day, the UK government said those who are involved in political tugging will be denied visa, right? And now they're moving a step forward. If they discover illegal funds and unlawful funds in your account, it will be seized by whatever means, right? So a number of things are happening globally. The ability to do what is right is anchored on the fact that you now have what I'll describe as third-party interests in the country. You also have the restive views that are technologically advanced. In the past, it wasn't like this, and they're increasing in number. Look at the NSAS movement. Look at how coordinated it was. And look at the impacts.
All right.
And so everyone who is will see all of this. And I think at the end of the day, we'll get out of the woods. It's just a matter of time.
And that's a good place to let it go. We do thank you for your perspective this morning, Mr. Morrison, Quakers, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
My pleasure.
All right, then let's take a look at some messages.
Yes, the first one is from Onu, and it's talking about the conversation just ended. On devolution of power as it relates to state police, I'll disagree with the learned Silk. Our governors do not have the temperament to manage a state police.
Ouch.
They are more abusive and have a penchant for maximizing power. But now, let's think of a regional police.
Is this speaking from experience or something? Experiential submissions? What Dr. Morrison says, talking about call for restructuring, we need to revisit the pre-independence political agreements that guaranteed political, social, and legal order. Constitutions so far developed in Nigeria seem to ignore fundamental clauses of that agreement. Well, you talk about local government functioning too.
Absolutely.
And this one is from Honorable Ademola Alalade talking about road safety now. UN Decade of Action on Road Safety is a right step in the right direction, and I'm happy to see this happening at this time. And government should invest in speed cameras as well. It's going to be a huge project, but it's achievable if it's taken seriously.
Well, this is from Joshua. He says, talking about accidents and bad roads. Bad roads causes more accidents than alcohol, overspeeding, etc. Here in Nigeria, most of our roads do not have parking space. Our road marshals find more pleasure in chasing vehicles than ensuring the safety necessary on our highways. He doesn't like that.
Well, interesting perspective. Well, by the way, Joshua, know that this is the second decade of action and not the first. We need to review how well did they perform in the first decade of action. Chidozie says about road safety, there's an urgent need for the Road Safety Corps to embark on sustained enlightenment campaigns in all cities in Nigeria. the process of issuing driver licenses should be reviewed because some drivers on our roads do not have any idea of traffic rules.
Well, look at this one. Excuse me. I think that conversation on road safety is extremely important. It's one that should keep going. But look at this one from Victor Owo, and it's about the law against ransom payment, which came up in the paper review. He says, our legislature should instead pass a law where it would be an offense if government cannot protect her citizens. If this is done, no one will pay ransom to bandits and kidnappers. I pray the legislators don't meet the devil on the road. Well, a number of them have already. I'm sure that if you go and investigate, a number of them would have either paid or would have contributed to the payment of ransom of loved ones or for relatives. I dare say that live on this program. But let us see how that bill fares in the National Assembly. Gentlemen.
Maybe it's if you're caught. You know, like I said, look, the law says anyone who is caught. It didn't say, well, you say, why did you catch that person I want you from? Well, anyone who is caught. So who knows? Nobody knows how this
very sad reality indeed. And I think, you know, just as, you know, people are able to talk about these things, the question then is, how are we taking them on board? I know members of the National Assembly watch these programs and they are aware of some of this information that people pass on to them. The question is, how do we internalize them? Do we even own the fact that people employed you into the National Assembly?
Or does political correctness come in the way?
Oh, is there a political wrongness?
When you get into politics, you'll find out.
Marco, is there a political wrongness? I don't know.
I do not know, but I dare say that I agree with Victor Owo, because if security was guaranteed and was assured for everyone, who wants to waste his or her money, expend money on kidnappers and bandits? Who? It's a question Chamberlain asked earlier. Well, that's all we'll have to leave it for the program today. We have to thank you so much for being a great part of the show. Thank you for always sending in your contributions and comments. We don't take it for granted, and we want you to keep them coming. I don't know why today feels like Friday, though. Maybe some people
mindsets, I guess.
Thank you for watching. I'm Mark Welgo Yusuf.
Don't forget, Mr. Quakers said attitude must change. So it's Thursday, not Friday. I'm Ayo Makide. Have a wonderful day.
I'm Chamberlain, so we'll see you next time.